I wouldn't know what to do. My son get a murder charge, bro. Like, I gotta stop him from crashing out, bro. Like,
he asked me that I want to talk to Kodak. I told him I ain't want to talk to Kodak or block Kodak. That was a detrimental move to him, bro.
Boo's crash out didn't start in a vacuum. His son Tutti was suddenly being framed as someone willing to go all the way over a diss aimed at his father. With Kodak Black at the center of it, what first sounded like reckless online noise quickly turned into something far more serious. Tutti wasn't just talking. He was exposed for making a real attempt, one that immediately put the entire hip-hop world on edge and quietly pulled law enforcement into the background, watching every move. Behind the Instagram posts and tough talk was a much darker reality. Tutti was moving around with switches, sawed-off shotguns, machine guns, and silencers. This wasn't exaggeration or internet rumor. The kind of activity led straight to federal attention, stacking charges that included weapons violations and obstruction of law enforcement. The result wasn't just paperwork. It was death threats aimed at multiple rappers and illegal. Situations serious enough to carry decades behind bars if it goes the wrong way. What pushed this situation to a boiling point was more complex and more dangerous than most people realized. This wasn't a single insult or a moment of lost temper. There were direct messages where Tutti said he couldn't wait to catch a rapper and shoot him, language that crossed the line from posturing into intent. At the same time, there were reports that he had been stalking Lil Cricks as far back as 2023, actively trying to make good on those threats. This is the kind of story that doesn't end clean. It's the type of conflict that leaves people either serving life sentences or ending up in a coffin. Sometimes both outcomes circling at once. And despite how it gets labeled online, this wasn't just rap beef. This was federal case territory, with consequences that don't fade when the timeline refreshes. Social media focused on Boosie's son supposedly going into full crash-out mode over a Kodak Black diss track. But that framing missed the deeper layers. The facts and the fiction blended together, and most people never bothered to separate them. The truth is, this situation had been building long before anyone noticed, with the real ignition point tracing back to 2023. Even that wasn't the true beginning. The roots went back further, to a business decision that set off a chain reaction still unfolding now. Kodak Black was offered $1 million to do a song with Tekashi 6ix9ine. From a purely financial perspective, he took it. That single move triggered a domino effect that led to threats, federal charges, and a young man spiraling toward decisions that could cost him his entire future. This wasn't the kind of controversy that blows over in a few weeks. This involves someone already facing serious federal gun charges, accused of possessing sawed-off weapons, machine guns, and silencers, making direct threats while out on bond. That combination is volatile. It's the kind of situation the system doesn't treat lightly, and it's usually how stories end before people realize how deep they already went. When Kodak Black was offered that $1 million collaboration with Tekashi 6ix9ine in 2023, the reaction was immediate and intense. For many in hip-hop culture, 6ix9ine isn't just controversial, he represents the ultimate violation. After cooperating with authorities and testifying against his own crew to shorten his prison sentence, he became the most widely rejected figure in street rap culture. That reputation followed him everywhere. Kodak's decision sent shockwaves through the community. But underneath the outrage, there was something calculated happening. 6ix9ine wasn't acting randomly. He was using established artists to legitimize himself, to prove that money could override even the strongest street codes. Working with Kodak wasn't just a song, it was a statement.
Me and all about to do a song with a nigga who, like, I don't even know the niggas he told on.
Went in on
and I ain't even from over there. Niggas some shit like, nigga, that's y'all rap. Like, I know only nigga squeeze this nigga out some cheese, homie. Yeah. I never do some shit like, bro, y'all ain't finna do nothing. Y'all ain't even squeeze a nigga out some money.
Kodak later went on Drink Champs and made a comment that froze the room. He said, $1 million is $1 million. He didn't know the people 6ix9ine and told on, and he wasn't from that area anyway. To him, that was someone else's rap. That moment stripped the issue down to its core. It showed that morals, street codes, and principles all come with a price tag if the number is high enough. This wasn't just about one track or one paycheck. It exposed a deeper conflict inside hip-hop itself. Kodak made it clear that, for him, street politics didn't apply when business was involved. That mindset split the culture down the middle. Some respected the honesty. Others saw it as a complete betrayal of everything street rap claims to stand for. From a business perspective, Kodak wasn't entirely wrong. The music industry has always prioritized profit first, principles second. But when your entire brand is built on authenticity and being real, taking money from the most famous snitch in hip-hop history looks different. Doesn't land as strategy, it lands as selling out. In the streets, snitching has always been the final line. No redemption, no second chances. Once that label sticks, it's permanent. That's where Boosie's reaction mattered. He had built a reputation on calling out violations of the code, even when it cost him money or relationships. For him, this wasn't abstract. Boosie called Kodak's brother directly and asked if the collaboration was real. When it was confirmed, he said it hurt him personally. He blocked Kodak completely. Not out of clout or performance, but out of disappointment. Losing respect for someone you once considered solid hits harder than any public insult. Boosie said that move was detrimental, and from a cultural standpoint, he wasn't wrong. The impact went beyond personal feelings. Kodak's decision gave other artists permission to work with 6ix9ine, weakening the long-standing anti-snitch stance in hip-hop. It forced a conversation nobody wanted to have. Was the street code still relevant in modern rap? Or had money finally replaced it? By 2024, Kodak Black was moving on a very different frequency. Reports started circulating that he was deep into substance abuse, affecting his judgment and impulse control. That shift in energy didn't happen in isolation. It sat on top of unresolved tension, broken alliances, and a cultural divide that had already been set in motion.
I wouldn't know what to do. My son get a murder charge, bro. Like, I gotta stop him from crashing out, bro. Like, then it worried me more. All them lit around him clutching, man. You know, easy for something to happen, bro. Like, should be having me worried as a daddy, bro. Like,
when unresolved beef collides with ego and substance abuse, the result is usually predictable. The behavior turns reckless, and the damage spreads fast. That's exactly what happened when Kodak Black dropped a diss track aimed directly at Boosie Badazz. The timing alone raised eyebrows. Kodak waited until the day before Boosie was scheduled to appear in court, a moment when pressure was already at its peak. That choice wasn't accidental. It added stress where there was already plenty, and it showed intent rather than coincidence. In the song, Kodak didn't dance around the issue. He went straight at Boosie, with personal attacks that cut deeper than industry criticism. He suggested Boosie was bitter because he couldn't sign him earlier in his career, framing it as jealousy and resentment. The implication was clear. Kodak was saying he succeeded without Boosie's help or approval, and that success made Boosie uncomfortable. He didn't stop there. Kodak questioned Boosie's standing as an elder in the culture, calling out how he moves and directly challenging his reputation as an OG in street culture that isn't casual commentary. That's a direct strike at someone's credibility. Kodak also painted Boosie as washed up and irrelevant, claiming the only time his name trends is when he mentions bigger artists like Kodak himself or NBA Youngboy. Musically, the track was polished, but the message was deliberate. Every line was crafted to hit personally and publicly. Kodak knew which buttons to push, and he chose the worst possible moment to push them. Boosie's response was immediate and emotional. He went to social media and unloaded a string of posts that made it clear the diss didn't just annoy him. It hurt. He accused Kodak of dropping the track right before court on purpose, calling it clout-driven behavior and questioning his character.
Now that you get older, you be like, bro, like, how the f*** you 40 years old still gotta look over your shoulder, you know, from your past. That's a f***ed up feeling. When you gotta go especially when you go in your city, you gotta look everywhere over your shoulder. Like, that shit wasn't worth it. The respect you got for anything you did ain't worth you being a older man looking over your motherfucking shoulder.
That's right.
The insults escalated quickly, moving from criticism of the music to attacks on Kodak's relevance, appearance, and career trajectory. Boosie framed him as an artist people no longer check for unless drama is attached. The most cutting moment came when Boosie painted a vivid image of Kodak sitting by the phone, waiting for bad news about his legal situation, implying envy and ill intent. Then he delivered the line that landed hardest in street terms. Boosie said there was one thing that would never happen to him: checking into protective custody the way Kodak allegedly had. That wasn't just trash talk. That was a public challenge to someone's toughness and standing, the kind of accusation that lingers long after the tweets disappear. He sealed it with an acronym meant to mock Kodak's image entirely, showing just how deep his anger and disappointment ran. This exchange didn't happen in isolation, and that's where the situation turns darker. The elephant in the room was Boosie's son, Tutti. This wasn't a bystander watching from the sidelines. This was a young man already facing serious federal weapons charges. The kind of list that reads like an arsenal rather than a single offense. Authorities charged him with possession of sawed-off weapons, machine guns, silencers, and obstruction of law enforcement. These weren't minor cases. These were charges that carry the potential for decades, not a few years. And they changed the entire risk level of everything happening around this beef. These weren't state charges that could be negotiated down quietly or pled away with probation. Federal weapons cases operate under a completely different set of rules. When machine guns and silencers are involved, mandatory minimum sentences come into play. Judges don't have flexibility. Even if they want to show leniency, the law doesn't allow it. In situations like that, the smartest move is usually to disappear from the spotlight, retain strong legal counsel, and fight the case without adding fuel to the fire. That's not what happened here. Instead of laying low, Tutti stepped directly into his father's conflict. Not cautiously, not indirectly. He jumped in headfirst. From a legal perspective, it was the worst possible decision. From a street perspective, it was classic crash-out behavior. Drawing attention while already under federal scrutiny only magnifies the consequences, and Tutti did exactly that. He took to Instagram and made his position clear, said he was really in the streets with it. He told people to ask around about him. He warned that he would put that belt down on anyone who tested him. In street language, that isn't metaphor. That's a reference to killing someone. When he added that he didn't have pictures with his equipment, he was signaling awareness of surveillance, implying he had weapons but was smart enough not to display them. When he said "we on y'all," that wasn't vague bravado. That was a direct threat aimed at anyone he believed was against him or his family. All of this was said while he was out on federal bond. That detail matters more than most people realize. Statements like that aren't just reckless. They can be used as evidence. They show mindset, intent, and a willingness to escalate. Every post added weight to a case that was already heavy. Underneath all of it was something deeper. Tutti had been trying to establish street credibility for years. The comment sections made that painfully clear. People laughed at him. They dismissed him as soft. They framed him as a privileged rapper's son who never had to earn anything the hard way. That kind of disrespect cuts differently when someone is trying to prove they belong in a world built on reputation and fear. That pressure doesn't excuse what came next, but it helps explain the escalation. Things shifted when Lil Cricks entered the picture. Cricks had ties to Kodak's circle in Florida, and when he started reposting Tutti's threats and laughing them off, the dynamic changed. What had been one-sided posturing suddenly turned into public humiliation. That's when the situation crossed into genuinely dangerous territory. What most people missed was that this didn't start there. Tutti had been targeting Lil Cricks since 2023. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction. It was a sustained pattern. A year-long stretch of messages, harassment, and attempts to provoke a response. That history matters because it shows intent over time, not a momentary lapse. Lil Cricks eventually posted screenshots. They showed months of direct messages from Tutti, repeated attempts to start problems, repeated efforts to be taken seriously. For a long time, Cricks ignored him. He didn't see him as a real threat. That dismissal only made things worse. As the messages escalated, they stopped sounding like insults and started reading like warnings. Tutti told him he wasn't built like that. He told him to come to Atlanta and see what happens. He said he wouldn't make it back. These weren't abstract threats. They were specific, direct, and repeated. In another message, Tutti claimed he wasn't even looking for him, but if he showed up, there would be no mercy. He belittled Cricks' affiliations, mocked his financial status, and framed himself as superior. The tone wasn't defensive. It was confrontational, almost eager. The most chilling message came when Tutti admitted what he was really chasing. He said he was ready to make an example out of a rapper. He said he had been waiting for a moment like this, not just to hurt someone, but to go viral doing it. He described living every day prepared to shoot anyone who tried him, daring someone to test whether he was serious. At that point, the situation stopped being about loyalty, music, or family pride. It became about a young man actively searching for a violent moment to validate himself, while already standing on the edge of a federal case that could erase his future. That final message exposed everything about Tutti's mindset. It wasn't just about hurting someone, it was about being seen. He didn't just want violence. He wanted the internet to witness it. He wanted the narrative to flip from being viewed as Boosie's son to being feared as a real killer. That distinction matters because it reveals the most dangerous motivation of all. When someone starts viewing murder as a path to recognition, respect, and virality, the risk multiplies. That's not survival, that's performance. That message showed a young man willing to throw away his future for clout and validation. He wasn't talking about protecting himself or defending his family from an imminent threat. He was talking about making an example out of a rapper, publicly to prove a point. That's not fear-driven behavior. That's ego-driven destruction, and it explains why his actions have been escalating so recklessly. To understand why Tutti is moving like this, you have to understand the pressure that comes with being the child of a hip-hop figure. In street culture, there's an automatic assumption placed on kids who grow up with money and stability. People assume you're soft. They assume you never struggled. They assume everything was handed to you. Tutti has lived under that shadow his entire life. When people look at him, they don't see an individual. They see Boosie's son, raised in comfortable homes, with access and protection most kids never had. They don't see someone who earned stripes the hard way. They see someone trying to play a role he didn't pay for. The streets have been vocal about that. The comments on his posts reflect it clearly. He's been called fake, soft, and privileged over and over again. That kind of constant dismissal doesn't just sting. For someone desperate to be respected, it becomes fuel. What complicates the situation is that Tutti wasn't completely removed from the street environment growing up. Boosie didn't keep him entirely sheltered. Tutti was around the block early, watching his father move and operate. That exposure blurs the line. He wasn't raised fully outside the life, but he also didn't experience the full cost of it. That difference matters. The real problem is that Tutti wants the reputation without the history. Boosie earned his name through prison time, loss, and sacrifice. He paid for it in years, relationships, and scars that don't show on camera. That kind of respect comes at a price. Tutti wants the outcome without the process, and the streets don't work like that. On top of that, Boosie has always tried to protect his kids from repeating his mistakes. He's been vocal about wanting them out of the life that nearly destroyed him. But to someone like Tutti, that protection doesn't feel like love. It feels like doubt. It feels like being told you're not tough enough. That perception breeds resentment, and resentment fuels reckless attempts to prove something that never needed proving in the first place. Now look at this from a legal perspective. Tutti is already facing federal weapons charges that carry the potential for 10 to 20 years at a minimum. That's before any enhancements. On top of that, he's making public threats that prosecutors can and will introduce as evidence. Every post, every message, every statement becomes part of a pattern. It allows the government to argue that he's a danger to the public, exactly the kind of person these laws are meant to stop. Federal prosecutors don't need speculation. They build cases on behavior. Right now, they're collecting everything. The threats, the messages, the tone, the intent. Piece by piece, they're shaping a narrative that says Tutti isn't just careless. He's willing to use weapons to intimidate, to threaten, and potentially to kill, all while chasing attention. And once that narrative is set, the consequences don't depend on social media anymore. They depend on a courtroom. For anyone who hasn't been paying close attention to how federal gun laws actually work, it's important to understand how serious these charges are. Possession of a sawed-off weapon and a silencer isn't treated lightly. These offenses carry mandatory minimum sentences, meaning there is no flexibility built in. Judges don't get to reduce them based on sympathy, background, or intentions. Once those charges are proven, the time is fixed. Add a machine gun charge on top of that, and the consequences escalate fast. At that point, the exposure isn't a few years. It's potentially decades in federal prison. When someone in that position starts making public death threats while out on bond, they're effectively daring the system to respond. That kind of behavior gives prosecutors grounds to revoke bond entirely and stack additional charges, turning an already serious case into something far worse. What's happening between Kodak and Boosie? with Tutti inserting himself and escalating things through threats, reflects a larger issue inside hip-hop culture. There's been a shift where authenticity is no longer proven through consistency, skill, or discipline, but through how far someone is willing to go with violence or criminal behavior. That environment pressures young men to perform toughness instead of building longevity. The streets are watching this unfold, and the message it sends is dangerous. When the child of a celebrity is openly talking about killing for clout, it reshapes what younger kids think success and respect look like. For those without money, fame, or protection, the consequences are even harsher. The example being set doesn't just affect one family, ripples outward. There's nothing honorable about destroying your future for approval. Tutti has access to resources most people never get. He could build businesses, create opportunities, and help his community in ways that actually last. Instead, he's chasing the same patterns that nearly destroyed his father, stepping into a lifestyle that offers nothing but loss in the long run. At its core, this situation was never just about toughness or defending a family name. It's about a young man with every advantage choosing the most dangerous route possible because of cultural pressure, insecurity, and a need for validation that social media can never truly satisfy. What started as a debate over principles, whether doing business with a known snitch is acceptable, has now evolved into something far more serious. It has crossed into threats of real violence, framed as entertainment. This is bigger than personal drama. It's about a culture that continues to reward destruction and confuse recklessness with respect. Until that narrative changes, stories like this will keep repeating. Young men with talent and opportunity will keep trading their futures for moments of temporary recognition. The unresolved part is what comes next. Will Tutti learn from the mistakes his father survived, or will he have to experience the system firsthand to understand where this path leads? If these threats ever turn into action, the outcome won't be symbolic. It will be permanent. Multiple life sentences, or a family losing a son, are the only endings left once the line is crossed. Boosie lived through that fire and came out trying to build something better. Whether that lesson reaches his son in time remains the most critical part of this story. Now the pattern is repeating, only this time the stakes are even higher. Boosie survived the system, learned from it, and eventually tried to build something stable on the other side. His son is moving toward the same edge, possibly faster, and with far less margin for error. Making violent threats while already under federal indictment isn't toughness. It isn't strategy. It's self-destruction, broadcast in real time. What this reveals isn't strength or fearlessness. It reveals insecurity layered on top of pressure. The behavior doesn't signal someone fully grounded in that life. It signals someone chasing an image, trying to force respect from people who have already decided how they see him. That's the trap. The harder he pushes, the less respect he actually earns, and the more damage he does to himself. There's also an uncomfortable truth about responsibility. At a certain point, a young man becomes accountable for his own choices. Age doesn't erase consequences, and the law doesn't care about upbringing once lines are crossed. At the same time, influence matters. When someone grows up close to power, money, and reputation, the lessons they absorb early shape how they react to disrespect later. Protection can feel like control. Guidance can feel like doubt. That tension often explodes when ego takes over. This situation also reflects something broader than one family. It exposes how hip-hop culture often measures manhood through risk instead of restraint. Violence gets rewarded with attention. Recklessness gets mistaken for authenticity. Young men learn that being feared matters more than being stable, and that lesson keeps reproducing itself across generations. The outcome of this story doesn't hinge on online opinions or temporary clout. It hinges on whether the cycle breaks or continues. One path leads to courtrooms, cells, and permanent loss. The other requires discipline, humility, and the willingness to walk away from people who only respect destruction. History shows where each road ends. Boosie already walked through the consequences and lived to tell the story. His son is standing at the same crossroads, only with less protection and far more surveillance. Whether he slows down in time or learns the hard way will determine if this becomes another cautionary tale or a turning point that actually means something.